talk about today is question asking skills. This skill set for mediation is very important because one of the key elements we use in terms of dealing with parties in order to keep responsibility on their side of the table is the ability to ask questions. Now, we've all been in a situation where we've asked the wrong question. We've asked a series of questions that went nowhere. We've asked a question where it had no impact whatsoever early on in the mediation, and then maybe 3 hours later, the same question comes up, and all of a sudden it's the question that opens everything up, and things start to fall into place like tumblers in a combination lock. So what is it about questions? Where do we ask them? What type of questions should we be using? Those are things we're going to address here today. So for question asking, let's go back a little bit and remember our definition. One of the goals we want to constantly keep in mind in terms of what constitutes a good question or what constitutes a bad question is our role and our definition of mediation. We're trying to empower people, and one way to do that is ask the kind of questions that will get them to think through what it is they want, what they're doing, should they be doing it, is this really what's important to them, so that we are empowering them to make informed decisions in their own best interest. So that's where we're headed, and we do that by applying question asking skills. Actually, as a mediator, there are two powerful tools we have. The first one is our communication skills. Everything we do in terms of communication, in terms of developing flow and focus, facilitating how the communication is taking place, whether it's being productive or unproductive, all of our communication skills, the ability to use reflective listening, the ability to ask kind of probing, seek to understand how they understand the situation, all of those skills are powerful. The second powerful skill that we have as mediators is the ability to ask questions. Good questions at the right time, the right place, can make all the difference in the world. So we need to explore some of the characteristics of what makes a good question. Now we're going to turn for help to someone called Bloom. Bloom's taxonomy of questions. He actually did some research, and primarily around the context of education, and developed a taxonomy of 3 types of questions. The first one we look at is knowledge comprehension type question. A knowledge comprehension type question is more of a data gathering kind of question. So this question type will accomplish certain things, and we want those things to be accomplished, but only at certain times, right, in the education process. The second one is analysis and application type questions. What kind of questions will cause thinking process to delve into analysis and application, so that if we're doing, well, for instance, let's say we're experimenting. We're in a classroom, we're doing experimentation, and I've got a hypothesis, and I'm going to find out, well, what happens if I burn this at 300 degrees? And we try it. We collect data. We put it down on our little data card. And we say, well, let's try it at 500 degrees. Let's try it on its side. Let's try it to the left. Let's try it on the right. In the meantime, we're developing, because of the questions we ask about knowledge and comprehension, a series of data cards. They're all laid out there as pieces of information. Well, application and analysis is what we do and how we organize that data. In other words, we could gather all of the information, look at it as it's laid out on the table. Let's shuffle the cards. Let's move them around a little bit and see if it offers a different picture. That's the kind of thing that application and analysis. Let's analyze the data, coordinate it, see what we can derive as far as application is concerned from how we're looking at it. You remember the story of kids doing an experiment with a fly, right? They put a fly down and they're experimenting with it, and they would look at it and say, fly, and the fly would fly away. Oh, that's cool. Fly away, and the fly would go. Then they decided, let's pull the wings off the fly. They pulled the wings off the fly and yelled, fly. Fly didn't move. Fly. Fly didn't move. Their conclusion, flies go deaf when you pull their wings off. Now that's a case of you've gathered the data, right, and you've shifted it around, but your analysis and your application may not be what it could be. We might need to do some other material or some more data gathering. The third is synthesis evaluation. This is, what are we going to do with it? What does it mean? How does it fit into reality? How does it fit into other data sets? How does it fit into my life, into reality? Does it have any importance whatsoever, any relevancy at all? In the college classroom I used when I was teaching, I would constantly get students who were real good from a high school setting with knowledge comprehension, data gathering, and real good at application analysis. But when I would ask them to write papers that would do any kind of evaluation or synthesis, they just did not have those skills. They had been trained early on to write all of their information without ever using the word I in the paper. Now, when they came into my class, I asked them, okay, I need some opinions. I need some evaluation. What does this mean for you? Let's make sense out of this. And it was very difficult for those students to begin to incorporate an I sentence because it had been trained out of them. Synthesis evaluation often wasn't a part of the 3 types of questions they had learned. So what we're looking for is the ability to address all 3 categories of questions, but at the right time. If you ask a synthesis evaluation question too soon, you're not going to have enough data to do anything with it. You ask an application question during a synthesis time, it could become problematic as well. So the first thing you have to do, as Bloom has indicated by developing this taxonomy, is you want to lay a database as best you can, gather as much information. Then you want to be able to move that information around to make analysis and application, and then look at it from a critical position to evaluate whether this is good, bad, indifferent, does it mean anything. That's exactly what we want to do with this mediation process. By sitting at this table, we are walking parties through a process of data gathering, application analysis, and synthesis evaluation by the questions we ask them. You remember the mediation process, right? Let's look at that. We started out with the mediator's opening statement. I'm basically giving information, setting the stage, communicating competency and competency, trying to set a tone at the table. And the next, we're going to hear from the parties. They're going to give information. Now this is kind of data gathering in a sort, right? Because they're sharing their side of the story. They're giving their perspective on the situation. So we're hearing from everybody at the table. Then, of course, we have joint discussion, where now we can begin to ask questions, start gathering data, maybe not challenging necessary, but probing, investigating, laying out those little cards of data information that we're going to be able to use and move around later. Then, of course, caucus, where I'm going to meet privately together with each of them. We're going to do that need exploration that we talked about in the need presentation. And then we're going to get back together, reconvening, see where we are, and then we're going into the agreement writing phase, whether it's agreement or no agreement, whatever we're writing up as the choice of the parties. But now notice, let's apply this process now to Bloom's taxonomy and see what we end up with. The process, remember the steps? MOS for mediator's opening statement, PAUS for parties' opening statement. Then we've got JD, joint discussion. CC, caucus with a complainant. CR, caucus with a respondent. RT, we're going to reconvene together. In AW, we're doing the agreement writing. Let's slide in Bloom's taxonomy. Now notice, the questions that you're going to have, there are no questions in mediator's opening statement, and during the party's opening statement, we've promised we wouldn't interrupt. So we're not really doing any information gathering per se there as far as my mediator role. They're certainly getting information from each other, but as far as what I'm going to be doing with it, I'm not asking any questions. But now notice, joint discussion is where I get to jump in, and begin to ask questions of the parties that starts to lay out the database. What often becomes difficult with new mediators is they skip joint discussion. What ends up happening by going directly into caucus because they feel more comfortable working with people one-on-one and they're more familiar with a counseling kind of model, they end up going straight to caucus and talking to the person one-on-one. They haven't developed a database. There's no knowledge comprehension material out there. So what they end up doing in caucus, they don't have enough of a foundation to really begin to apply the application analysis questions. Well, they end up gathering data in caucus that becomes unavailable to both parties. So the richness, the value of having a joint discussion and having a good joint discussion is this pulling out the questions that develop knowledge comprehension. Then when I go to caucus, privately with the complainant, privately with the respondent, then I can start to ask those application questions, those analysis type questions. In your opening statement and during our joint discussion, we talked about, the possibility of, or the policy said, or the suspension was. I'm now covering the data, but looking at it from an application analysis point of view. I can do that with both sides of the party. Then, when we get back together in terms of reconvening together, I can develop now those synthesis evaluation questions. Now, keep in mind, this is not a strict, structured approach. The lines between each of these are often blurred. So the line between knowledge, you can start to ask knowledge comprehension questions still in caucus. And you might even be ending up at the end of your joint discussion throwing out a few analysis application type questions. That's all fine and good. Certainly at the end of each caucus, you're probably asking a few synthesis evaluation type questions, and when you're back at reconvening, you may still drop into application analysis. Those lines can be blurred, but keep in mind the type of question, these process steps fit very nicely. Joint discussion, great for knowledge comprehension. Caucus, great for application analysis, and when we get to reconvening and agreement writing, great for synthesis evaluation. So, let's look at what some of these questions actually look like. Let's go to the knowledge comprehension type questions. It's a whole list of them here. These are usually, typically, who, what, when, where, and they're often oriented in the past. So I might ask the question in joint discussion after I've heard both of their opening statements. Well, I was curious. Tell me a little bit about, who was it that signed the evaluation? Who was it that actually authorized the suspension? Things like that. I'm investigating into the past. Who was it? What happened? Could you say a little more? Clarify for me. Say more about. I'm gathering data. Because the larger the base, the more I'm going to have to work with. The number 9, look on there, you'll see so. This is often a nice one to use because I'm sitting here, someone's talking, and they're saying, well, they should have done this, they should have done that, it would have been helpful if. And I can kind of do the reflective listening. So what you're telling me is that it was really important for you to have the process or the policy followed to the letter. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So I'm able to gather information, but also do some reflective listening. So with that little pause there can really gain you a lot. It gives you a chance to maybe gather your thoughts. Lets them know that you're listening to them, and it can be another source of gathering information. You can also couple with that so after they respond, yeah, that's exactly. Well, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about or clarify for me, and now you're back into that probing, investigative kind of questions. What you're going to notice is that knowledge comprehension type questions often are factual, deal with the background information, they're more investigative in scope, and they're past focused. Now, in some situations, say in an EEO situation or an investigative situation, the problem solving stops here. They've gathered their information, they've gotten the knowledge base, and now a decision gets made. That's not what a resolution model proposes. What we are doing here in the mediation table isn't just investigating. We're not just staying in the past. We're not just uncovering what did and did not happen. Not so much the impact of the truth. We're gathering the data so that we can do application and synthesis next. So it doesn't stop here. Let's go to the comprehension analysis questions. Several of these as well. We're asking the kind of, remember, we're moving into a caucus setting, so I can be a little more personable with the parties. I'm meeting with them privately, and I could ask the kind of need exploration questions that we covered in the need presentation. But notice, what impact? A good impact question. What impact would it have if the suspension was not dropped? What impact would it have if you didn't get your leave? What impact, we're asking those kind of questions here. We're moving now into how would that idea or how would that solution that you're offering work? Tell me a little more. We're asking them to actually paint the picture of laying down the application. What does it look like? How would that outcome affect your life if you could have anything you wanted today? This is often a question that works effectively with supervisors or management. If you could ask, because usually they don't expect anybody to ask them a question like this. What would you like to see happen here today? Well, I want the EEO dropped. Okay, what else? Is there anything else? If you could ask for anything at all, right? We're looking for analysis application. Anything at all, what would you ask for? Well, I could really use the employee to be a little more supportive, a little more respectful. Maybe when we're in meetings to not fight every decision I make or criticize every comment I make. So they can begin to explore what they would like to see happen. We're taking the information we've already gotten, we're looking for application. What would you do if you got what you asked for? Well, let's say I want $300,000. What would you do with $300,000? Well, I'd go to I'd retire, I'd buy a boat, so it sounds like a boat and retirement are pretty important to you. No, just the money. Okay, so it's a money issue. I can begin to seek what application from the data they're working with. And of course, what did you hope to accomplish here today? Another application type question, where you wanted to go with this. If you had anything you want, what did you hope to accomplish? I'm getting them to think and analyze the situation that they're in now. All right. Oftentimes, these questions are possibility and option type questions. Perfect for what's happening in caucus. Let's go to the last one, synthesis evaluation. These questions start them to think in terms of, does this match reality? I mean, does this mean anything to you? Is it going to work? So I can get how do you think, either the supervisor or the complainant or respondent, how do you think the person on the other side of the table might respond to your request? So I'm going to take them out of their shoes right now and put them in the shoes of the other person on the other side. What do you think they might say when you ask for $300,000? What do you think they might say when you tell them you're going to go all the way to the top of the Supreme Court with this complaint? They get to think in terms of evaluation and synthesis, how they might respond. If they laugh you under the table, how would you respond to that? I want them to think through all of their options and how they're going to apply this. Is there another way to get what you're asking for? You want $300,000? Is there another way to do that? Could you work more hours? Is there another way to accomplish what it is you're looking to accomplish? Let's think through this. If you were the person on the other side of the table, how would you respond to what you're asking for? And the other one up there, what do you think they might be asking for here today? It gives them the chance to take the application analysis material that they've had and see how it relates to the other side of the table. Another set of it, another reality section. How is this going to work? Will it work at all? If it doesn't, how do you plan to respond? Do you have any responses? I just want you to think about it. Not that I have an opinion as to what they should do or not do, but if they're going to make an informed decision, I want them to be able to think through each of these steps. How important is it that you get $300,000? Which would you rather have? I'm going to ask them to prioritize their option. Would you rather have, what if the supervisor says no to $300,000 but yes to the question about respect and dignity? Would you trade one off of the other? How important is it to you? Keep in mind, I'm not trying to talk them into anything, but I'm helping them think through their best interests. And then I'm looking for details. Which date, which time, which etc. best works for you and why? Again, evaluation. These questions often are the who will, what will, how will these things happen. And they are generally future focused. Okay? So we've gone through each of the three and what those questions could look like. By applying these questions in the particular setting, we begin to accomplish the goals we're looking for. We want these folks to get as much information as they can and then think through that information that they've got and then see if this is exactly what they want to do. empower people to make informed decision in their own best interest. There are questions designed for doing that, and we have a process where these questions fit in very well. There's one other kind of question that often happens or comes up and is often used in a mediation process, and that is a reality type question. I've added this here. It doesn't quite fit into, it's probably more a synthesis and evaluation kind of question, although the result of a reality test question could be more information and it could be application. This is a specialized question, and there's several characteristics I want you to think about in terms of addressing these. The purpose of a reality test question is to explore unrealistic expectations. Somebody might sit back and say, well, I want $6 million and that's what I'm asking for. Well, everybody at the table knows that's not going to happen. No way on earth is $6 million going to cross that table any way, shape, or form. So it's time for a reality test question. Reality test questions should not be done in front of the other party or the other parties. It can create an imbalance of power if we're not careful. If I ask a reality type test question on somebody who's asking $6 million and the result is they come back thinking, oh, maybe this is a stupid request, it elevates power on the other side of the table. So it's best to do a reality test question one-on-one, individually. I'm not going to talk you out of anything, and you can, of course, do anything you want to do, but I'm wondering, how many cases like this do you know that have actually gotten a check for $6 million? Well, none, I see. Then what do you suppose are the chances that you'll get $6 million? Oh, I've got the best case there. At least you've given them a chance to think about it. So you want to address or explore unrealistic expectations is the purpose and goal of a reality test. You also want to offer a peek into the reality that they're proposing. Some people, grant them the reality they're asking for. I'm going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm going to the EEOC. Okay, fine. At the end of today, no agreement. We're going forward. It's going to court. I was wondering, did you have any expectation of a timeline as to when this might actually get before the judge, right? Now, you want to be careful in how you ask that, but we're asking them to think about the reality they're asking for. Well, I don't know. It might take, well, it'd probably take 7 years to get before a judge. Really? I see. Is that a kind of timeline that's acceptable to you? Were you looking for, maybe a 10-year response or a sooner one? Is 8 fine with you? Yeah, that's fine. I'm not unhappy about that. Well, what about expenses? Do you have an attorney? Is it going to cost you anything during those 8 years in terms of going all the way to the top? No, I've got a free attorney. Ah, you're a lucky one. So you are going to raise the question, offer them a peek into the reality. They may decide for themselves once they see the picture, this really isn't something I want. It really might damage the work relationship and the environment between me and the supervisor if this drags out for 2-3 years. I really don't want that. They get a chance to think about it. The other one it's going to do is do not challenge. That's not your role. That's not your responsibility. You don't turn to somebody and say, well, God, $6 million, are you crazy? That's a question, but it's the wrong tone and wrong type of question. All right? So you're not challenging them. You're offering a peek and you're exploring unrealistic expectations, but don't challenge. Next one. Do it only when necessary. Reality type questions, reality test questions, you may go through several mediations, several conflict scenarios, and never once ask a reality test question. If the parties themselves are doing their own reality testing, you don't have to do it. You don't have to sit there and go, well, let's see, I've asked a knowledge comprehension type question. I've asked a analysis question. I've even asked I haven't asked a reality test question yet. Okay, ready, folks? It's not necessary. The only time you need to ask a reality test question is if one of the parties, they're immovable. They're entrenched. They will not get off the dime. I'm going all the way. I'm going to go to the court. I'm going to the top with this. Then it's time to meet privately and ask an exploratory question about that reality. All right, next one. Be prepared to back off. All you can do is ask the question. Well, do you think that it's going to take a while to do this? Yeah, it's going to take 2 or 3 years. Is that something you want to see happen? Well, yeah, I'm ready. I'm prepared for that. I've got money. I don't care if it sucks every dime out of my retirement fund. I'm going forward. It's time for you to back off. Yes, it's unrealistic. Yes, it's ridiculous. Yes, it's probably a bad idea. But it's their responsibility to make those choices, not you. Okay? So be prepared to back off. All right? That's it. In terms of asking the kind of questions, there's a time and a place. And keep in mind, we've all asked the wrong question. We've all asked questions that went nowhere. I've asked I've asked a series of questions that went absolutely nowhere. And I sit there and go, well, where is this taking me? Nowhere. It's time to back off. I spent an hour in a pursuit of a particular line of questioning, realizing this wasn't appropriate. Every one of us, as good mediators, go through that experience. You will too. It's not going to be a problem. That's the best way to learn, by throwing a question out and realizing its impact. It didn't get what I wanted. It didn't go in the direction I'd hoped for. Maybe I need to back up and ask another question. This process is very forgiving. You may go down the wrong road for a while, but you can always back up, regroup, ask the kind of questions that can begin to open things up. So don't be too hard on yourself, and practice these as much as you can.